to welcome all of you once again to this webinar series on Bhagavad Gita organized by Wisdom Intellectual Forum Puri. Today we are going to have the 17th lecture in the series under the title The Secret Knowledge. Well, before moving into this class to know what is this secret knowledge, let me remind all of you what was discussed in the last class. In the last class, Professor Das spoke on imperishable truth. What sort of truth it is? It is a truth which is absolute in itself. No science whatsoever can ever grasp this truth. Nor even religion, nor even philosophy can ever grasp this imperishable truth. So, that this imperishable truth is a human effort that is possible by the stages of pratyahara, due to withdrawal of the senses, the body, and any external connection with the self. After having this withdrawal, even the mind has got to transcend itself, because if the mind doesn't transcend mind, there would be residual thoughts in it, and that would be not allowing the mind to focus inwards. So after the withdrawal from the senses, the body, the mind even has got to transcend itself. So it is a state where what is left behind is nothing but pure consciousness. And this state of consciousness does not exist for a long time. It exists for few minutes. Well, this was not the part of the lecture last Saturday, but later on after the class we had a discussion on this, and I could know from him that this state of pure consciousness where every connection is lost, this state lasts for only few minutes. If that lasts for more time, then there will be a total distraction of the body. So again, that from that state of pure consciousness, the self has to return back to the body and focus on dhyana. So this is what happens. This is the state of pure consciousness where the imperishable truth is known and where the knower becomes the known. And what is this imperishable truth can never be put in words. It is a state of realization. It is not a state of description. Hence, unless and until one has the ability to reach to that state, to realize what is that imperishable truth, no amount of description can ever describe this imperishable truth. This is what we learned from him in the last class. So it is a possibility the yogis, the mystics have undergone this experience where there is a realization of pure consciousness. There is a state where there is nothing left behind other than pure consciousness. That is a state where the knower becomes the known, and therein lies the imperishable truth, and that cannot be realized by one and all. It's a possibility, but the journey is very difficult. That's why more often we are confined to the relative truths in, say, from the platform of science or religion or philosophy, and reaching that imperishable truth is a very difficult journey, which only a few can dare to take. So with this, with these words, let us move to Professor Pramod Das for knowing from him what is this secret knowledge that Bhagavad Gita tries to convey. Now over to Professor Das for the lecture.
Namaskar to all of you. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, both audible and visible, both.
Respected Dr. Rao, very esteemed participants of this session, we shall discuss about the concept that is secret knowledge. This comes under the topic chapter 9th, and Dr. Rao very beautifully synopsized my last talk. So the secret knowledge is the knowledge of knowledge. Suppose we come to a conclusion that this is knowledge, then the secret of knowledge is the knowledge beyond that knowledge. That means the knowledge of knowledge, knowledge of all knowledge. The knowledge beyond all conclusions. Science concludes, philosophy concludes, religion concludes, but these conclusions are pseudo conclusions, not real conclusions, because the conclusion of science is probability. Science concludes with probability, philosophy concludes with speculations, and religion concludes with beliefs. Every religion is a religion of the belief of a community. So the so-called conclusions is not knowledge. So there is a knowledge, there is a possibility of knowledge beyond all apparent knowledge. So we can divide the possibility of knowledge into three types. One is the knowledge of the manifestations. Manifestation means the knowledge of the apparent world, the empirical world, the world that appears to us. The second one is the knowledge of the unmanifest, the cause of all the modifications, manifestations. It may be accepted by science or not, it may be accepted by philosophy or not, it may be accepted by religion or not, but it is a possibility of human knowledge, the knowledge of the unmanifest. And it also logically implies, if we speak of a manifestation, then naturally it implies that it is the manifestation of something. If we speak of a modification, it naturally implies that it's the modification of something. If we speak of appearance, then it is the appearance of something. Something is there which appears as something else. If we look at the ornament, we cannot say that it is out of nothing. golden ornament means it is the product of the gold. Though we do not see gold in its original form, we see the form, the shape, the size, the weight, the design. So these are the manifestations of gold. But from this manifestation, we can logically speak of the state of the unmanifest. Gold is there, therefore golden ornament is there. Reality is there, therefore we speak of the appearances. The unmanifest state is there, therefore we speak of the manifestations. The ocean is there, therefore the waves are possible. Waves are not possible without the ocean. But the ocean is possible without the waves. The unmanifest is possible without the manifestation. But the manifestation is not possible without the unmanifest. The effect is not possible without the cause. That means knowledge of the effect, knowledge of the cause, and the third possibility is knowledge of both cause and effect. Knowledge of the manifestation, knowledge of the unmanifest, and knowledge of both the unmanifest and the manifestation. Many philosophers, many philosophical systems, they speak of only the manifestation. They ignore the unmanifest. They think that this is only a flux. Everything is subject to change. The world is just like a river. Only there are effects, there are changing effects, and there is no substance, no permanent cause. Many philosophers, they focus on the unmanifest, and they think the manifestation is not real. The manifestation is just like appearance, jagat mithya. They speak only the unmanifest is real. So they cancel, they reject the manifestation. And many philosophical systems, they accept, including Bhagavad Gita, that accepts both the unmanifest and the manifest. Three possibilities are there. The secret of knowledge is to have a comprehensive knowledge about these three possibilities. If we are confined with only the manifestations, we claim that our knowledge is scientific, because whatever we perceived, whatever we came to know through our observation, experiment, through the scientific ways, that is very authentic. That may be apparent, but that is authentic because they are directly perceived. If we speak of the cause, the hidden cause, the unmanifest cause, the latent cause, which is not perceived, which can only be inferred, only be imagined, only be speculated, that is myth, that is metaphysical, that is not physical. this knowledge, if we say that this is our knowledge, then this is not the secret of knowledge. That means we are satisfied with the fragments. We are satisfied with the part knowledge, khanda jnana. We did not try to know the totality, the total possibility. On the other hand, in order to know the unmanifest, the cause, the hidden cause, the latent cause, the transcendental cause, the substantial cause, the unchanged cause, uncaused cause, if we ignore the manifestation, ignore the effects, ignore the changing phenomena, that is also part knowledge, that is also khanda jnana. Both of them are useless. They are true, they are pragmatically effective from their own perspectives. But we should know that that is not the complete knowledge. That is the part knowledge. So the secret of knowledge is to know the limit of our knowledge. Suppose there is a chain, and the chain is very strong chain. But what is the weak point? What is the strength of that chain? That strength of that chain lies in the weak point. If any part of the chain is weak, then the strength of a chain is a misnomer. Similarly, if any way we are ignorant, ignorant of any perspective, then that is the weakness of our knowledge. That means we don't have the complete knowledge, the total knowledge. So the knowledge of our ignorance is the secret knowledge. What we know, that is not important. We should know what we do not know. We should know what is the limit of our knowledge. And this is the highest discovery. This is the highest discovery of a human being. We give slogans of scientific discoveries, that science discovered this and that. But if there is any discovery of human beings, please mute all. Jumal. Thank you. Sir, कौन कहते? What I was talking about, Rao sir.
The limit, the secret of our knowledge is knowing the limit of our knowledge, and it is the highest discovery that we can have.
Good. That is the highest discovery. Not only in India, but also in Western countries. From the Western country, I shall take the name of Immanuel Kant. Kant was not interested in phenomenal world and nominal world. Kant was only interested to know the limit of human knowledge, how far man can go. With the best asset of his sense organs, he cannot cross space and time. And with the best faculty of rationality or rational categories or the categories of understanding, man cannot go beyond that. So whatever man knows through these forms, And through these forms, man can at least know the phenomenal world. This is the highest discovery of Immanuel Kant. He was interested in this. Therefore, he is critical. His criticism is that even if we apply both empiricism and rationalism, both the assets of our sense experience and understanding, we cannot know the noumena, we cannot know the reality. We can at least know the empirical world. Suppose we do not know the limit of our knowledge, that means we are ignorant of our knowledge. That is the highest discovery of a human being. Therefore, science is very honest. Science is very honest. Science does not say that whatever I know, that is absolute, absolutely true. Science claims that my latest conclusion, latest discovery, latest knowledge is subject to revision. It is probable. Therefore, science is honest. Philosophy is also honest because philosophy does not say that this is the final conclusion, that after this nothing can be said. So every philosophy is simply a view. It is a view from a perspective. It starts with speculation and also it ends with speculation. And philosophy admits that. Many people criticize the study of philosophy in a very satiric way, that philosophy searches the black cat in the dark room where the cat is not. There is no cat in the darkness, in the dark room, but a philosopher is searching that black cat in that dark room where the cat is not. We accept that satire positively. Yes, we are searching the black cat in the dark room, and we are not worried about whether there is a black cat there is or is not. We are not worried about that because philosophy is only interested in searching. Philosophy is the only pursuit. It is the pursuit of knowledge. Philosophy is not interested to reach at a conclusion, to find out something. That is the job of science. Philosophy is only interested in searching. Therefore, we are searching. And in the course of searching, whatever is found, discovered, that is science. Without searching, there is no science. So searching is philosophy. and the discovery is science. So philosophy does not end with any discovery of science. Philosophical search goes on, goes on. That means we know and we should know, man should know the limit of his knowledge, the limit of his inquiry, the limit of his existence. And the knowledge of that limitation is the true knowledge, true cognition. Therefore, Immanuel Kant is called a critical philosopher because he is very much critical about the status of knowing, how much we can know, what are the assets of knowing, and with that assets, what can be known. And as the assets, so is our knowledge. Through the empirical assets, we cannot know the transcendental. So the secret of knowledge is the knowledge of all knowledge, number one. The secret of knowledge is the comprehensive knowledge of all possibilities, number two. And number three, the secret of knowledge is to know the limit of knowledge. If at any point we claim that this is my knowledge, then that is nothing but our ignorance. That means at a point of ignorance, we judge ourselves that this is knowledge. It is beautifully explained in the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo speaks of different levels of mind, different levels of consciousness, such as overmind, higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, super mind, and the highest is pure consciousness or Satchidananda. Why he is speaking about different steps, different levels of consciousness? Because they are there. And in every level of consciousness, our status of knowledge is distinct. Suppose in case of overmind, something is known to be true. We claim that this is knowledge, but that becomes a state of ignorance when we reach the higher state of mind. That is the higher mind. Then that becomes false in the state of illumined mind. That becomes ignorance in the state of intuitive mind. That becomes the state of ignorance when we reach at the state of supermind. That means every state of our perfection is proved to be a state of imperfection when we transform to the higher state. Today I think that this is the status of my knowledge. But tomorrow I come to know, oh, what I knew yesterday, that was my ignorance. That was my mistake. So we realize our past mistakes, we realize our past mistakes only because of there is a possibility of transformation of our knowledge, of our awareness, of our consciousness, in whatever language we may understand. Today we are very much convinced that this is philosophy, this is science, this is religion. But in this corona pandemic crisis, we came to realize, no, this is not science what I understood. This is not philosophy what I understood. This is not religion what I understood. This is not materialism what I understood. This is not spiritualism what I understood. Therefore, scientific conclusions change, philosophical views change, and religious beliefs also change. And the change is natural because that is not the final knowledge. That is not the total knowledge. If we do not know the elephant as such, and we all are like blind men, so the view that we give today about that elephant is just like a pillar or elephant is just like a wall. So that description may be changed or will be changed tomorrow. Tomorrow we shall come to know that my view about the elephant was a wrong view. Similarly, tomorrow we will come to know that my view about science, my view about materialism, my view about happiness, my view about material prosperity, etc., that were wrong. Because there is a natural evolution of human consciousness. Mind develops from one level of consciousness to the higher level of consciousness. So landing in one level of consciousness, we should not and we cannot conclude that this is the real state of consciousness, or this is pure consciousness, or this is knowledge. To know this, if we have this knowledge at least, Dr. Rao said that self-consciousness is hardly attained. If it is attained by anybody, he cannot enjoy that experience for a long time. So we are always bound with the empirical world. We are always bound with the consciousness of something. And that object of consciousness may be subtler and subtlest. What is the object of our consciousness? That varies from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. But in every state of our consciousness, there is an object of consciousness. And wherever there is an object of consciousness, whenever there is an object of consciousness, the empirical world is there. So man is always bound with the empirical world. Only in the state of samadhi or in Bhagavad Gita, in the state of Sthita Prajna, we are out of the empirical, the object of consciousness. In that state, the object of consciousness and the subject of consciousness, they are one. But in samadhi state, one cannot stay for a long time, but in the Bhagavad Gita it is stated, With a mind of a Sthita Prajna, man can live his whole life. So this is a spiritual training. It is not necessary that we shall attain samadhi and we shall be deprived from the empirical world. Rather, we should be very much practical. We shall attain the steady fast mind, Sthita Prajna mind. Sthita Prajna means the prajna, the wisdom, the knowledge that we came to know, we have to hold that. Sthita with the prajna. Not sthita with ignorance. Sthita with wisdom. If I know something, if I came to know the truth, I shall live with that truth. I shall be stable with that wisdom. This practice we can do, so there is no necessity to attain the final state of samadhi. But we can enjoy that, we can experience that. Therefore, the state of samadhi is very practically experienced in the state of pratyaya, in the name of Sthita Prajna in the Bhagavad Gita. That one can live his whole life, one can do every activity, one can enjoy every types of feelings with an equipoised mind, with an equanimous mind, with Sthita Prajna mind. So, what we are discussing, just we discussed all this week. We are discussing about. So this is the final state where we have to reach. But what is our problem? The problem is that we invest our part knowledge, and we become convinced that this is our whole knowledge. So every moment we find ourselves with this dogma or that dogma. So every state of our consciousness, every state of our knowledge is a state of ignorance. What generally we know? We generally know that every state of our knowledge is a state of knowledge. But the secret of knowledge is that we should know that every state of our knowledge is the state of our ignorance. Because we have not reached, we have not attained the highest level of consciousness. So on the ladders, if we are at any one ladder in the series, then every lower ladder signifies the state of ignorance only. But that is knowledge in comparison to the lower ladder. So every state of our being can be considered as both knowledge and ignorance. Knowledge in comparison with the lower ladder, ignorance in comparison with the higher ladder. If I am a plus 2 student, I am wiser than a matric student, and I am not wiser than a graduate. Similarly, if I exist, I behave, I feel with a particular mindset in a particular level of consciousness, I should think this is not my complete personality. This personality, what I have now, that is only the natural consequence of one level of consciousness only. If we think so, if we think of this limitation of our personality, then there is a possibility of transformation of our personality. And life is very short. Life is very short. So we have to transform quickly. Quickly we have to transform, because life is very short. We shall live only 60 years, 70 years, or maximum 80 years. If we shall live beyond 80 years, that is the life of unconsciousness. Subconsciousness, then unconsciousness. Maybe very few people are conscious and active after 80. So actively we live only 70 years or 75 years, maximum people. So 75 years is a very short period. And we have already lost till the date 50 years, 60 years, without knowing the secret of knowledge, without knowing the secret of our personality. And we are satisfied with the knowledge we have. We are satisfied with the personality we have cultured in so many years, through our education, through our conviction, through our society, through science, philosophy, religion, literature, etc., etc. Through material perspective also, that I have 5 buildings and 5 towns. We are very much satisfied. If we are satisfied, that means we do not know the secret of knowledge. We are satisfied with the apparent knowledge. The secret of knowledge is that the knowledge that I know, that is not knowledge, that is ignorance. Whatever I have known, that is simply a state of ignorance. To know this is the secret of knowledge. Our knowledge represents a very small island of knowledge that has been surrounded by a vast ocean of ignorance. We have become Kupamundaka. That small island is just like a well. And we think that the area is a very big area, and our area of knowledge is very vast. Those who do PhD, whole life they claim that I have worked in this area. And they think they are specialist in this area and they are satisfied. Therefore, doctors claim that I am eye specialist or ear specialist. Specialist means you have to focus on a particular area, and that is the certificate that you are a specialist. One day will come, the eye specialists will be divided into 2, the left eye specialist and the right eye specialist. You have to, if your left eye is in problem, you have to go to the left eye specialist. And he is a specialist, means he has obtained the highest knowledge in that field. This way we are satisfied. Whatever I told till now, that was my introduction. With this introduction, now we shall come to the topic. How can we apply this theory in our practical life? In knowledge, in action, and in devotion. Three things are there: Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti. Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti. Knowledge of the unmanifest, knowledge of the manifestation, and knowledge of both the unmanifest and the manifestation. Three possibilities are there. We can apply these three possibilities in our action and devotion. We discussed about Jnana. We can apply this in action and devotion. In action, whenever we do something, how can we judge that I did a right action? What is the standard? By which standard we can say that this is the right action? Should we refer to the transcendental world or the empirical world? So all moral norms are fixed according to the empirical conditions. Even according to the society, according to the community, according to the place, according to time. Some cardinal values are there, like love, compassion, sacrifice. They are beyond space and time. They are universally true. We are not going to discuss that. But when we think of right or wrong, good or bad, we have to judge an action contextually. From a given context, we can judge an action whether it is good or bad or right or wrong. That was the problem with Arjuna in the battlefield, to fight or not to fight. When he is thinking of fighting, some reasons are there in his mind by which he is convinced that he should not fight. Then Lord Krishna is convincing Arjuna that the reasons that you think that such reasons are supporting you, they are not good reasons, they are bad reasons. This is the battlefield and you are a Kshatriya, you are here with a right cause. That is that means you are here to protect dharma. So you don't think that you are Arjuna, you are a warrior. And your intention should be to protect dharma. And whoever does adharma, you will fight against him. That is the principle. So by that principle, you should fight. So your fighting is dharma. Your not fighting is adharma. This is the one reason which can be given in the support of fighting. And Arjuna has some other reasons in support of not fighting. So this is the dilemma. To fight or not to fight. Similarly, in every crossroad, in every situation of our life, we are always placed in the crossroads. We are confused with this question, to do or not to do, to be or not to be. And we have distinct reasons for both thesis and antithesis. So both thesis and antithesis are the manifestations. Both the possibilities are the manifestations. Our mind should go beyond these dichotomies, beyond thesis and antithesis, and that is the state of Sthita Prajna. And that is the attitude of a Niskama Karmi. That if I am a Niskama Karmi, I should focus on the action. Here the action is in the unmanifest state. Here the action is in the unmanifest state. Action as such. I shall do my duty for the sake of duty. I shall do every action in the sense of duty. And my intentions are very clear, that here the intention in the Bhagavad Gita, the intention should be Lokasangraha. That if whatever I am doing, if it is meant for Lokasangraha, if it is meant for the well-being of all, then that is good action. In spite of my personal loss, even I may die, even I may be killed in the battlefield, but I should fight, because my intention is to protect Dharma. Who can think so? The mind which is established in the unmanifest. So Niskama Karma means the karma which is understood in the unmanifest state of that karma. That I am only concerned with karma. I am not concerned with the modifications. Modifications means the expectations of the results. What will happen? This will happen or that will happen. If this will happen, what shall I do? If that will happen, what shall I do? Such orientations are necessary before doing an action. But once we start doing an action, we should not be worried about the consequences, because the consequences are nothing but the modifications of our action. The manifestation of our action, which have not occurred, which will occur in future. So consequence is the future imagination. So whenever we are doing an action, we should do it in the sense of duty, means we should take it as its unmanifest state. That is called Nirvikalpa state. Nirvikalpa. This is simply my duty. I don't know and I don't expect what will happen. What will be the consequences? Even I may die. In the war field, even I may die. Even I may be killed. Death is the very great consequence. That's a great loss. I am ready for that. I shall attain Viragati in the war field. I am a fighter, I am a Kshatriya, I am here to protect Dharma. So I shall fight. Against whom? Anybody who commits adharma. This is the commitment of a fighter. This is the commitment of a worker. This is the commitment of a performer. This is the commitment of a worker, a doer. I shall do my duty. I shall perform my duty unconditionally. There is no condition at all. It may be contextual, but in every context, there is an unconditional commitment. So to be inclined for that unconditional commitment in course of doing an action, is our awareness, is our consciousness of the unmanifest state of karma. If we are baffled by, if we are confused by the consequences of our action, not one consequence, we are worried about the multiple consequences. We imagine so many things. If this will happen, what I shall do? If that will happen, what I shall do? If he will speak me this way, how can I argue? What will be my reaction? We imagine so many things. All these imaginations are nothing but the modifications, manifestations of our action. And the third state is a real karma yogi should be aware of both the unmanifest and the manifestation. Unmanifest means I am focused with the karma. I shall do my duty in the sense, I shall do my any action in the sense of duty. Manifestations means the consequences. Consequences must follow the action. And the person who is a karma yogi, what should be his mindset? His mindset is that, yes, I shall do this action from the unmanifest state, that I am doing this action in the sense of duty, and also I am ready for any consequence that will follow. That means I am ready for both the unmanifest state of action and the possible manifestations. Suppose one is only focused with the unmanifest. He is not conscious of the manifestations and he is not ready for that, then that man will commit suicide. That man will feel frustrated. That man will become mad. One should be mentally ready that yes, I am doing this action from the unmanifest state, taking it as my duty, but whatever will be the consequences, I am ready to face it. I am ready to meet it. That man is a karma yogi. That man is not disturbed by any possible consequences that will follow. So in karma also we have three possibilities: the unmanifest, the manifest, and both the unmanifest and manifest. Those who are only concerned with the manifest, they are sakama karmi. Those who are only concerned with the unmanifest, they are not practical. They are not practical. They become trapped by the consequences. They get stress, mental depression, frustration after doing, because they are not mentally prepared. Who is a karma yogi who can see both the unmanifest state of karma and the manifest state of karma? Yes, this is my duty, I am going to do, but I am ready for any consequences. Now we shall apply it in bhakti, in devotion. In devotion also, that is the unmanifest state of love, unmanifest state of love, bhakti, devotion. The other is the manifestation, state of love. And the third one is both the unmanifest and the manifest. Most of us believe that idol worship, that we believe in idol worship. That Jagannath is Brahman, Ganesh is Brahman, Shiva is the Lord, Lord Krishna is the Lord. So many images. These are the manifestations of that unmanifest Brahman, unmanifest state. So many people worship many people worship the images and they are satisfied with that. Many people worship those who are wise. They think that Isavasya idam sarvam. That the same Isa, the same Brahman is pervaded everywhere. So in everything there is Isa. So Isa is not confined to any image, is not confined to any place, is not confined to any time. So we should not think that Isa is only in the temple. The whole world is the temple. They worship the unmanifest state of the Brahman or Ishvara or God. And the third possibility is that many people believe both the unmanifest and the manifestation. They believe in the images, and their faith in images does not hamper their faith in the unmanifest. That means they are very much comfortable with both the unmanifest and the manifest. Three positions. Many people are very much comfortable with the manifest. They can't understand the unmanifest. If we'll say, why are you going to temple? God is here. Worship this table. Worship at your home. They will not understand. They will go to temple. And they think that God is in the temple. And who is God? Who is that Isha? Isha, that my Jagannath is my Isha. This is one type of, this is worship. And this is also bhakti. But that man will not be conceived that Brahman is nirguna, Brahman has no guna, Brahman is nirakara, Brahman has no akara, no name, no form, no space, no time. He will not understand. This is one limitation in devotion. Similarly, many people believe in sunya, nirguna, that God is everywhere. Sometimes they ignore the manifestation. That in this dog, there is also Brahman. In that tree, there is also Brahman. They only search the nirguna, the sunya, somewhere it is. This is also one-sidedness. But he is a sthita prajna. He who knows that the unmanifest is the same as all manifestation, Anu and Bhuma. The nuclear state and the whole state. Macrocosm, both are same. The subject, object. Jivatma, Paramatma, both are same. So they are comfortable, they are not disturbed with Jagannath or Balabhadra or Subhadra or Ganesh or Lord Krishna. They are not disturbed. They are very much comfortable with the images, and they are also very much comfortable with the Nirguna Brahman. This is a level of consciousness. So in the state of knowledge, we should have the knowledge of the unmanifest and the manifestation. That means we have a thoughtless mind. I shall speak only 5 minutes more. We have a thoughtless mind when we are getting asleep. When we are sleeping, our mind is at rest. Our mind is free from all types of thought. In the meditation, we can experience the thoughtless mind. That is the unmanifest state of my mind. Similarly, my mind is engaged with different types of thoughts. Who is a Sthita Prajna? Who is a man of wisdom? Who knows the secret that I am the witness of, I am conscious of both the thoughtless mind and thoughtful mind. Thoughtless mind and the thoughtful mind. So that man can handle the thoughtless mind when it is required, can handle the thoughtful mind, and can know its limitation when it is required. He is not one-sided. Similarly, in religion, that man will be more secular in the sense that man can respect all religions because he is convinced of the wisdom that these are all manifestations. These are all manifestations. Not only Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, but also Allah, but also Jesus, and all possible forms are nothing but the manifestations. So he has no problem. He will have respect for all other forms. Because he knows the unmanifest is one. And these are all the manifestations. The person who knows that there is ocean, a silent ocean behind the violent waves, that person will not be disturbed by the waves. That person will not be disturbed by the waves because he understands that waves are there because there is a silent ocean. So one person will be comfortable with every religion and he will be tolerant with every religion. He who understands that every religion is a manifestation of, is a modification of that one unmanifest. This is the secret of knowledge. Similarly in karma, he can be a niskama karmi who can accept a karma in the sense of duty, And at the same time, he should be ready for any consequences that follows his duty. If I am doing my duty, then I am also ready for the consequences. Consequences are the manifestations. My duty is the unmanifest. Unmanifest means it is unconditional. I shall do it. I am committed to do it, irrespective of the consequences. But when consequence will come, I shall be frustrated. I shall go on depression. No. I am stable with the unmanifest state of action. I am also stable in the possible consequences. Then I am a karma yogi. Similarly in devotion, in love, I believe in selfless love, the unmanifest state of love. I also believe in the manifestation of love. Suppose I love my son. Suppose my son is a kid. I shall say that I love you unconditionally. I have the unmanifest love for you. He will not understand. He will expect a chocolate from me. He will expect a balloon from me. So I have to calm down to that state to give a balloon or chocolate. That is the manifestation of love. So one man should be comfortable with the unmanifest state of love and the manifestation state of love. I have to do all, though we think that this world is the world of appearance, everything is false, everything shall pass away. These social norms are false. They are only traditions, conventions. We know but we have to be engaged with all social rituals. We have to do all social obligations. We have to be involved in our family, thinking that these are the manifestations of that unmanifest love. Otherwise, society will not accept, family will not accept. They will think that this man has gone mad, or not practical. So we have to know the theory and the practice. Theory and practice. This is beautifully explained in the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo and in the Bhagavad Gita. That is called the process of ascent and descent. Ascent and descent. Evolution and involution. Something is evolving to the higher state only because the higher is already present in the lower. So the chocolate I am giving to my son is nothing but, it is a manifestation, but it is the manifestation of that unmanifest love. That is not a mere chocolate. That is a chocolate in the empirical sense. The son is satisfied with chocolate because I know the unmanifest love. I know in this chocolate I have that infinite love. In this piece of work I have the sense of niskamo. In this piece of knowledge I know my limit of knowledge. That person is ever liberated. That person is ever happy. That person knows the secret. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das, for yet another nice lecture on the secret knowledge in accordance with Bhagavad Gita. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat box. If someone wants to put any question or wishes to have a clarification or make some suggestion, they are welcome. I'll wait for half a minute, and those are interested to pose questions, they can unmute and directly ask the question to the speaker. Otherwise, alternatively, they can write the question in the chat box so that I can take the question and put before the speaker. Both the ways are allowed, and let me wait for half a minute for somebody to unmute and pose some question or seek a clarification or make a suggestion. Let me wait for half a minute. I don't see anybody, neither I see any question in the chat box. So, well, I don't see a question in the chat box, mainly because as you see, the fact being that the lecture was so clear and precise, and I don't see any sort of complication in this lecture, and that's why I don't see any question or any clarification to seek from the speaker. So anyway, let me go. Well, I see somebody writing in the chat box. Let me check. Say it's by Shravani Misra. She has a question. Can we apply this secret knowledge in our day-to-day life, every aspect of our life? Well, you spoke on that, but still a bit of line of reply is anticipated from you.
Yes, answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. Done.
Answer is yes. But when we are dealing with our children, we do that, and we all know that. We all know that we are cheating our children. Cheating is a very negative term, but we do that with our children. Suppose we give a chocolate or give a doll to our child. We think that it is a doll. Doll means it is the manifestation. We think that it is not the reality, but the child is satisfied with that. By that way, we can pacify the child. But we very much know that this is not the reality. So, in every sphere of action, we should know both the possibilities, whether it is appearance or reality. Suppose we are getting angry. One should be conscious that he is getting angry. Otherwise, the problem will be very it will be a very great problem. If you are having any emotional feeling, you should go beyond and you should be conscious of your feeling. So you are executing that feeling, that is the manifestation. But you are conscious of that, that is the unmanifest. That is called self-consciousness. I am conscious of my actions, of my feelings. I am conscious what I am doing, what I am feeling, what I am thinking. If I am not conscious, that is bondage. If I am conscious, then I am liberated. That means I know what I am doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Das. So, very nicely said. A man who has that secret knowledge finds himself both in the unmanifest and also in the manifest. He has a balance between the two because he has the knowledge of both the sides. So there is no problem in that, because a man with such a secret knowledge, though attains a state of unmanifest, he is able to return back to the state of the manifest, and again from the state of the manifest he is able to reach back to that unmanifest state, because a man with that secret knowledge, he is able to see both the sides of the coin. So there lies the resolution of the problem what Shravani Mishra has tried to ask, and very nicely explained by Professor Das. Now, maybe see the student Hemalata Nayak, the Sthita Prajna, it was already one class has been dealt on that, but I would like the speaker to speak a few lines on Sthita Prajna, because maybe Hemalata Nayak might be a student. Maybe in few lines, please explain what is Sthita Prajna.
Sthita and Prajna. Prajna means knowledge, wisdom. The wisdom that you have, you should be sthita. You should be stable with that wisdom. What happens with us? We came to know something, but we fail to act accordingly. We know the truth, but we don't become that truth. So knowing and becoming should go hand in hand. If I know, I should become. If I have prajna, I should be sthita with that prajna. Arjuna was not sthita with his prajna. Therefore, Arjuna was confused in the battlefield. Arjuna was there to fight, but when he reached at the battlefield, he became confused. Arjuna represents a common man. All of us speak very great things, big things, but when practical situation comes, our knowledge becomes fused. Our mind becomes empty. We have knowledge, we know the technique, but at the time of need, we fail to utilize it. So, if you do not know, that is excused. If you do not know, that is better. But if you know the truth, if you know the unmanifest and manifest both, that man will never commit suicide. That man will never feel unhappy. That man will never be frustrated in his life, because he knows both of the possibilities, not the both, three possibilities: unmanifest, manifestation, and both the unmanifest and manifestation. If you at least know this, stay with your knowledge, act with your knowledge, live with your knowledge. So living with your wisdom is the art of living. Man should know that art of living. So Stita Prajna means the equanimous state of mind, that mind which is established with wisdom, which is groomed with wisdom, which is cultured with wisdom, which is firm with wisdom, and it is never become unstable. It remains firm. Suppose somebody will give bribe, you will not take 1,000, 2,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakh. Suppose he will give 1 crore, you may take. If you are taking 1 crore rupees as bribe, that means you are not Stita Prajna. That means at any cost you become baffled, you become confused. So when Arjuna was in the battlefield, he faced the situation that he is going to fight against his brothers. So this was the situation in which Arjuna was disturbed. Because I am going to fight with my brothers. Better we should not fight. No. If my prajna is stita, that means if I really know that I am here to fight, to protect dharma, then whoever will do a dharma, I shall fight. That means I shall not be, I am stable with my knowledge, I am stable with my prajna, I am convinced, strongly convinced with my knowledge. That is Stita Prajna.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Das. So from this we learn, Hemlata Naik, it's for you. Stita Prajna is a man of complete wisdom. It is not about just knowing. It is about living as you know. Knowledge is one part, but living according to that knowledge or getting established in that knowledge is that man who attains that state of Stita Prajna. He is a Stita Prajna, he is a personality who is totally established in knowledge, that in every action that knowledge is made explicit. But what happened with Arjuna? He had the knowledge, but the applicability part was missing. So that's why he fell into the confusion, which Professor Das was just accepting. Look at the sadhu sannyasis. We think they are Stita Prajnas. Well, they might be having the knowledge of the Vedas or the Upanishads, but somehow they fail to live according to that knowledge. That's why we find some sadhus, in the name of sadhus, they are, well, I don't disclaim their knowledge, they might be having knowledge, but they don't live according to their knowledge. That means they are not established in the knowledge. They are not established in wisdom, in that wisdom. That is, they don't live according to their wisdom. That's why they carry on certain mischievous activities, and hence some sadhus are also in jail. So they are not Stita Prajnas. So what Professor Das said is, Stita Prajna is, it's not just having a complete vision, it is not just that, living with that vision. It is not just having wisdom, but living with that wisdom. It's not that Arjuna was ignorant. It was not that. Arjuna was a man of highest knowledge, but what the failure in him is the applicability part. His mind got disturbed, distorted at the time of need. So he is not established in knowledge. He had the knowledge, but he was not established in knowledge. So having knowledge is one thing, and being established in knowledge is another thing. That is a step ahead. You see, I'm saying I have the knowledge is one thing, and to say I am established in that knowledge means it's a level higher, wherein my actions are in accordance with that knowledge. So there lies the difference. And the Stita Prajna is one who is established in that knowledge, in that wisdom. Okay, so that's the message that we got from Professor Das. Now, we have a question by Prabhat Naik. Wants to know how is this idea of secret knowledge taken? If I understand the question, something like this: how is this idea of secret knowledge taken? If we look at Sri Aurobindo and if we look at Bhagavad Gita, what would you see any sort of difference in that?
I spoke about Sri Aurobindo in order to understand this, because Sri Aurobindo speaks of different levels of consciousness, different states of mind, and a layman thinks the mind he has is the final mind. So the knowledge he has, that is the final knowledge. But in the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, it is experienced, it is taught to us that every state of our consciousness is only a state of ignorance, because there is a possibility of a higher consciousness. Again, there is a possibility of a higher consciousness. That means every state of consciousness is only a manifestation of the total consciousness. Till we reach the state of Satchidananda, till we reach the state of Samadhi in Patanjali Yoga, till we reach the state of Sthita Prajna in Bhagavad Gita. So every ladder is a ladder. We don't think that that ladder is the final step. So the personality we have, that is only the manifestation. That is not the complete personality. Tomorrow, you will condemn, you will criticize your own personality. Oh, I was so, you will laugh at yourself. So the secret knowledge is to know the limit of your knowledge. If you think that you have knowledge, and if you think that that is your final knowledge, that is the best manifestation of your knowledge, then that is nothing but your ignorance. If you think that this is my knowledge, according to my education, according to my circumstance, according to the present manifestation of my mind, then that is the secret of knowledge. That means you are really knowledgeable. So when Socrates was declared as the wisest man of the humanity, Socrates also admitted that yes, I am really the wisest man, because I know that I don't know. Others don't know that they don't know, but I know that I don't know. So knowing your ignorance is the real knowledge. So in that sense, I took the help of Sri Aurobindo in order to explain the different levels of consciousness. And every level of consciousness, it is a state of knowledge from the standpoint of the lower ladder, and it is a state of ignorance from the perspective of the higher ladder. So we are always marching towards the highest perfection. So in between our journey, every step of our journey is only an imperfection. We have to understand this. If we understand this, then we can have the secret knowledge. That is the secret knowledge. That we know the secret. All claim that I am knowledgeable, science has done this, philosophy has done this, I have done PhD, so many scholars have done PhD under my guidance. This is only your manifestation of ignorance. That means you don't know the secret of knowledge. Secret of knowledge means there is still a higher possibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das, for the response, and nicely said. In order to explain the idea of secret knowledge that we have in the Bhagavad Gita, you took the help of Sri Aurobindo to make an accent towards the towards the highest level of consciousness, and you are trying to explain the levels of consciousness. In order to explain that, you took the aid and help of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. So thank you very much. Well, I don't see any questions. Well, within 2-3 minutes, let me tell what you have said. Well, it was a beautiful lecture. You started defining this secret knowledge as the knowledge of our status of knowledge. So secret knowledge is the knowledge of our status of knowledge. So having said this, you then reasserted that secret knowledge is the knowledge of our limitation and also the knowledge of the beyond. In order to establish this, you have taken a thesis of dividing knowledge into 3 parts, mainly the knowledge of the external world or the empirical world, which we say as the world of appearance, and second, you talk of the knowledge of the unmanifest, and finally, you talk of the knowledge of both the unmanifest and the manifest. So, having made this categorization, you made it still more clear that this knowledge is nothing but the knowledge of the effect, that is the manifested world. Second, the knowledge of the cause, which is the unmanifest Brahman or Ishwar behind everything that is there in the world. Now, number 3, it is the knowledge of both cause and effect, that is the knowledge of both the unmanifest and the manifest. So your categorization is very nice, very appropriate, and you have tried to justify this categorization in the light of Immanuel Kant from the Western perspective. Very nicely done. Now, more interesting part in the lecture comes from when you say that in every stage of knowledge, what is defined is our ignorance. Every state of knowledge implies a sort of ignorance, because if we assume that this is a state of knowledge, then we get attached to it with that limited knowledge and feel and sense as if that is the complete knowledge. So every state of knowledge, every level of conscious knowledge should carry with it that there is a state of ignorance attached with it. And the secret behind the secret knowledge lies in understanding this, that the knowledge that we have is only a limited knowledge, or the knowledge that defines that our knowledge is limited, and there is a vast sphere of the unknown. Whatever you think is known is only a limited area, and the sphere of unknown is bounded, okay, to whatever we know. So that sort of elevation is required. So a man who is convinced with the world of appearances, with the effect, he sees this world with, say, with certain consequences, and he thinks of the consequences. He becomes a Sakama Karmi. But a Nishkama Karmi is one who is able to see both the sides of the truth, that is both the unmanifest part and the manifest part. So that is a man who is stable, who is a Sthita Prajna, who is established in all conditions, because he is able to see the thesis. Say, if you say the manifest as the thesis, then the antithesis is the unmanifest. So Sthita Prajna is able to see the thesis and the antithesis, but at the same time he is able to transcend both the thesis and the antithesis to reach at a level which is beyond both, but at the same time he has the experience of both. So he is a man of the highest knowledge. Okay, so in that knowledge, he knows that those who are confined with the manifest world, they are having just a limited knowledge, and those who confine with the unmanifest, they cannot go to the manifest. So there is also a problem. So a Sthita Prajna, or a man having the secret knowledge, is having an elevation from the thesis of the manifest and the antithesis of the unmanifest, and also having an elevation from both, having a transcendence from both. He is able to move from the manifest to the unmanifest, and also the unmanifest to the manifest. So he is able to make a transition from both the sides. So a Sthita Prajna is not a man who is escaping from the world. He is there in the world, but nothing in the world is going to bind him, because he knows the technique of moving to the world, and he also knows the technique of withdrawing from the world. So that is a man who is a Sthita Prajna, and that sort of man has this secret knowledge, who knows what is knowledge, what are its limits, and the way it expands. So he has the knowledge of all the dimensions. So that, and there lies the secret of knowledge. That is knowing the limitation, and elevating and transcending the limitation to the area of the totality. But what happens? Those who are confined to the manifest, they see a part and they confuse as the whole. Now, one thing very interesting that you said of the unmanifest and the manifest are one and the same. During a course of your lecture, when you said Isavashyam idam sarvam, the unmanifest is there in the manifest. In every particle that is manifest, there lies the unmanifest. And today, even the modern science is speaking of this. Today, the microscopic world in the modern science is speaking of God particle. In every smallest, tiniest particle, there is an entity called as God particle. Now you see, the science has come up to the level of speaking of what is called as God particle in the material world. So this justifies your stand, Isavashyam idam sarvam. That means the unmanifest and the manifest are one and the same. The difference comes only to the ignorant. And those who are elevated, those who are established in knowledge, Sthita Prajna sees the unmanifest in the manifest and also the manifest in the unmanifest. So you can see either ways. So you can see the manifest in the unmanifest and also the unmanifest in the manifest. Both the ways he is able to make a transition. So there lies the justification of the statement Isavashyam idam sarvam, that has been said thousands of years back, but that could be realized by modern science only recently. So this is the greatest advancement that we have in our culture, in our tradition, in our ancient scriptures. So very nice lecture, sir. You have tried to decipher what is secret knowledge. It was a great lecture. I really enjoyed this lecture, and I hope most of the participants might have got your lecture, might have got the sense from your lecture, and they might have enjoyed your lecture. But one thing,
hello, sir.
Yes.
Very beautifully you synopsized. You spoke better than me.
Nothing like
Better
that.
No, wonderful. I shall speak only two sentences.
Okay.
The secret of science is to know the limit of science. The secret of philosophy is to know the limit of philosophical speculations. The secret of religion is to know the limit of religious activities. That is my submission. There is another question. Please read. I shall speak only in one or two sentences.
Okay. Thank you. Very nice. So, whatever area of knowledge that we have, we pass through, we go through, we should understand the limitation of that field, because that only leads to an elevation. If once we say our area is complete, there would never be
No. That is ignorance.
That is it. So very nicely said. The secret of sciences lies in that we have limitation, so that leads to elevation. So rightly said by Professor Das, and very nicely he has summarized the entire talk in very beautiful lines. Well, Sarita Satyapathi, she has some question. She says, we are much under the control of our emotions generated by our mind, and it becomes really difficult to acquire the divine knowledge, because we are so much confined to these emotions, to this material world, that any sort of action to the divine is really a difficult task. How do you see this?
The very simple thing. Every emotion, we have to understand that every emotion we have, that is only a manifestation. That is not the reality. Even your emotion of love, that is also a manifestation only. You are not identified with any type of emotion. That is only manifestation. So all emotions, all feelings, all social obligations, all social duties, we should do our duties. We should have our feelings. We have to attend our feelings. But we should have a sense that these are only manifestations. So take the manifestation as the manifestation. Don't take as the don't take the appearance as the reality. Therefore, I told, even if you get angry, you be conscious that you are getting angry, so that you can control your anger. If you get angry and you have a knife, then you can kill the person. You can't control your emotion. Similarly, if you are in a loving emotion, then also you have to control it. Similarly, if you have appetite for any food, you have to control that appetite. That is called pratyahara. The 2 days before I told about pratyahara. Man should have the technique of a pratyahara. That as I can engage my senses in the sense subjects, similarly I can withdraw my senses from the sense objects. Similarly, as I can engage my mind with certain feelings or emotions, I can engage. It is necessary to engage. Similarly, I can withdraw my mind from such feelings. I feel, but I am free from feelings. I am doing, but I am free from doing. I don't have karta bhava. I feel, but I am not the feeling. I do, but I am not the doer. One should have this sense of the unmanifest while he is engaged with the manifestations. We have to practice it intentionally, voluntarily, deliberately in our practical life, in our family, with our friends. Deliberately you practice and you observe what you are doing, whether you are really involved with the manifestations or while being involved in the manifestations, you are conscious of the unmanifest. This is yoga. This is spiritual sadhana. I am involved, but not involved. Tenatektana bhunjita. That means bhunjita, you enjoy, but you be attached with a sense of detachment, like water in the lotus leaf. I am involved, I am attached, I am living in this physical world, but with the sense of detachment. ବୈରାଗ୍ୟ ଭାବ ରଖି ଭୋଗ କରିବା ଦରକାର, ଭୋଗ କରିବି, କିନ୍ତୁ ବୈରାଗ୍ୟ ଭାବ ମୋର ଥିବ, ତାହେଲେ ହବ। ଯଦି ଭୋଗ ଭାବରେ ମୁଁ ଭୋଗ କରିବି, ତାହେଲେ ମୁଁ ସେଥିରେ ବୁଡ଼ିକିରି ମରିବି। ତେଣୁ ସବୁ କଥାରେ ରାଗ ଆସିବ, ରାଗ ଆସିବାଟା ନ୍ୟାଚୁରାଲ। କିନ୍ତୁ ରାଗ ଆସିଲା ବେଳେ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିପାରୁଥିବି ଯେ ମୁଁ ରାଗୁଛି, ମୁଁ ଆକ୍ଟିଂ କରୁଛି। ଷ୍ଟେଜରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ ରାବଣ ରୋଲ କରୁଛି, ମୁଁ ଭଲ ଭାବରେ ଜାଣିଛି ଯେ ମୁଁ ରାବଣ ନୁହଁ, ମୁଁ ହଉଛି ପ୍ରମୋଦ। ପ୍ରମୋଦ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ରାବଣ ରୋଲ କରୁଛି। ଆଉ ମୁଁ ଯଦି ସତ ସତିକା ରାବଣ ବୋଲି ଭାବିବି, ମୁଁ ତ ସତ ସତିକା ସେ ଯୋଉ ଝିଅଟି ସୀତା ରୋଲ କରୁଥିବ, ମୁଁ ତା ସହିତ ମିସବିହେଭ୍ କରିବି ଷ୍ଟେଜରେ, ବିକଜ ଆଇ ଏମ୍ ରାବଣ। I am not Ravana. I am playing the role of Ravana. So I am not angry. I am acting as if I am angry. এই টেকନିকটা ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ କଲେ ହବ। ତେଣୁ ଆପଣ ଯେତେ କ୍ରୋଧୀ ଥିବେ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆପଣଙ୍କର କ୍ରୋଧଟା କମି କମି ଯିବ। ଯେତେ ଲୋଭୀ ଥିବେ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଲୋଭ କମି କମି ଯିବ। ଯେମିତି ଅଜ୍ଞାନ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆସ୍ତେ କମିକିରି, ମୁଁ ପରା କହିଲି ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କର ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଡିଫରେଣ୍ଟ ଲେଭେଲ୍ସ ଅଫ କନସିୟସନେସ, ଏପରିକି ଇଲୁମିନ୍ଡ ମାଇଣ୍ଡ, ଇନଟ୍ୟୁଟିଭ ମାଇଣ୍ଡ, ସେଇଟା ମଧ୍ୟ ଇଗ୍ନୋରାନ୍ସ। କାହା ତୁଳନାରେ? ସୁପର ମାଇଣ୍ଡ ତୁଳନାରେ। ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଯେତେ ଜ୍ଞାନ ପ୍ରାପ୍ତି ହେଲେ ବି ସେଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ହାୟର ଷ୍ଟେଟ ତୁଳନାରେ ଇଗ୍ନୋରାନ୍ସ, ଅଜ୍ଞାନ। ତେଣୁ ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସ କଲେ ଏଇଟା ହବ।
Yes, thank you again for another nice response. The beautiful part of it is that but the secret knowledge lies in knowing that, say knowing the emotion. If you are in anger, you should know that you are in anger. So it is only that you can control the anger. Otherwise, the anger will go on expanding and it will blast. So
enjoy your emotion.
yes.
And many people have emotion, but they don't enjoy their emotion because they are trapped by their emotion. अरे भोग लोक भोगी पारंतिनी। एते धन रखिछ कौन हबो? धन को भोगुन भोगी पारिबेनी, खाली accumulating सेमती इमोशन जदि आसिला, इमोशन भितर बुड़ी किरी मरि जांती। कि इमोशन रो बाहर रहिले सिना इमोशन टाको एन्जॉय करिवो। ସେଇଟା ହଉଛି but sir, Rao sir, you spoke nicely. You really you spoke better than me today.
Nothing like
very
that.
Nicely.
It is from whatever you are saying that I have tried to summarize. Thank you for your good words.
Thank you.
One thing again, I got one thing from you, that it's good that you become emotional, but it is better that you know that you have become emotional.
That is
the beautiful part of the secret knowledge.
Be the witness of your emotions. Be it anger, be it love.
Sir. Thank you.
Otherwise, love will trap you, anger will trap you.
Very nice, sir. Thank you.
Because emotion is a manifestation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Very nicely said. Thank you for your very nice lecture. So it's now time to welcome Srimati Swarnalata Tripathi Madam to propose a formal vote of thanks. Over to Swarnalata Madam.
Namaskar to all. I thank all the participants for being with us in the lecture series of the Bhagavad Gita. Today we had a beautiful session. I extend my deep sense of gratitude to all the participants for their presence and participation. We are all thankful to the speaker Pramod sir for his beautiful talk on the secret knowledge. The secret knowledge is the knowledge of all knowledge. The secret knowledge is the knowledge having which knowledge everything is known. I thank Dr. Rao sir for giving a beautiful concluding remark at the end of the session. His lucid way of presentation is really appreciated by our heart and mind. I thank you all. We shall meet again next Saturday with a new topic. Thank you. Pranam.
I also thank you, madam, for being so much connected with this forum, that you are able to successfully conduct this webinar series. Thanks, a lot of thanks to you too, madam. Thank you very much. Finally, I thank all the participants for being connected with us. Thanks, everybody. And also the question raisers who made this webinar still more meaningful. Thank you, everybody. Now the meeting is closed. Thanks, everybody.